We are on the first Sunday of our new sermon series, Hey Siri, Answering Life's Biggest Questions. And it's fitting since this is the time of year where we tend to get reflective and like Matthew prayed, tend to look backwards of what went well, maybe what didn't go well, look forward of what we hope will go well, of habits and rhythms that we hope to put in place for the new year. But what happens when we say, hey Siri, we ask a question, and the answer just isn't quite as simple as whatever AI technology can spit out? Our question today is, who am I and why am I here? It's what happens at the core of philosophical conversation since there was ever a thing called philosophy. How many of us have ever asked that question of ourselves? Who am I and what in the world am I doing? Yeah, I ask it all the time. Just so happens that today is Epiphany Sunday. It is the Sunday in the life of the church where we celebrate and commemorate the Magi making a long trek to visit the Christ child. And I can see no better reason of trying to answer, keyword trying, because I'm just going to go ahead and give you a spoiler alert. I don't know why you're here. I don't. And most of the time, I don't know the exact details of why I'm here. But on this Sunday, when we celebrate the Magi making their journey to the Christ child, we call it Epiphany Sunday. And Epiphany's literal meaning is a manifestation or an indication of the existence or presence of something, especially of a divine being. It means to show, to make known, or to reveal. And so when we ask this question, who am I and why am I here, I can think of no better starting point than those Magi of some 2,000 years ago, who the Christ child was manifested to them as the very God of the universe. Because if we're going to begin to even dare to ask that question, who am I and why am I here or what am I to do, then I know no other way to start it than with God. Epiphany is one of those weird things, and actually the Magi is kind of a weird story. We get the most detail about them in Matthew's gospel. So let's read how they show up together. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in the territory of Judea during the rule of King Herod, Magi came from the east. They asked, where is the newborn king of the Jews? We've seen a star in the east and we've come to honor him. When King Herod heard this, he was troubled with everyone in Jerusalem, and everyone in Jerusalem was troubled with him. He gathered all the chief priests, all the legal experts, and asked them where the Christ was to be born. They said, Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what the prophet wrote. O you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, by no means are you least among the rulers of Judah, because from you will come the one who governs, who will shepherd my people, Israel. Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and found out from them the time when the star had first appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search carefully for the child. When you found him, report to me so that I too may go and honor him. When they heard the king, they went, and look, the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with Mary, his mother. Falling to their knees, they honored him. Then they opened their treasure chests and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Because they were warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they went back to their own country by another route. Oftentimes in our nativity pictures and settings, we've got Mary and Joseph and the little Jesus, and we've got the angel and all the animals and the shepherds and the Magi looking over them, and all of the depictions. There's always three Magi, but that's not quite how the story goes. The shepherds come, what they have seen or what they have been told in a vision is true. They go back to their fields, and sometime later, we don't even know how long later, the Magi show up. In fact, Matthew's gospel doesn't tell us there's 3 or 5 or 100. We have no idea. We just, we're good Christians here and we're good Trinitarians. So 3 is a good Christian Trinitarian number, and so why not be 3? But what we do know is that they traveled from the east, far, far away from Jerusalem. That means they weren't Palestinian. They likely weren't Jewish. Some scholars think they may have been from modern day Iran. We don't know. We know that they were searching for something. Maybe they saw a meteor. Maybe they saw a star. Not real sure. We know they stopped at Herod's castle and said, I'm looking for a king. And can you imagine if the king is there and somebody says, I'm coming looking for the birth of a new king? Red flags. So not exactly smart on these wise men's part, because they put Herod on the hunt for Jesus. I mean, it's all convoluted and strange. Regardless, the Magi show up to this stable where Jesus is born with gifts of frankincense, gold, and myrrh, expecting to see some royalty. I mean, that's the type of gift you would give to royalty. They're very expensive, very treasured items, not anything that a baby could use. Good for Mary, probably helped her recover from her excruciating childbirth, but not so much for a baby. Many of you know I love Barbara Brown Taylor, Episcopal priest and professor, and this is a picture in her children's book of the Magi. She wrote a children's book called Home by Another Way, and because there is lots left to the imagination in the telling of where the Magi came from, what exactly their purpose was, what they hoped for, she takes some literary grace and comes up with a backstory for them. She says, they had searched for meaning their entire lives. One read lots and lots of books and tried to find the meaning of life and what the core truth of being alive really was about, only to fall up short. Another looked for herbs and a special diet and all of those kind of things to find true meaning, and still fell up short. Another still looked to alchemy and all sorts of magic in order to find some sort of meaning, and fell up still, until they saw a star that burned so bright it was as if it lodged in their eye, Barbara Brown Taylor says, almost blinding them. And so they walk towards that star until they find the baby Jesus. And the baby Jesus and his parents are completely hospitable to them. And they find that what they were searching for all along wasn't book knowledge, wasn't success, wasn't some special diet, wasn't some sort of hidden meaning to the meaning of life at all. But it was the welcoming nature and arms of God incarnate. So complicated, but so simple. It's part of the human experience to ask deep questions, or to pretend like those questions that keep us up at night and plague our minds and souls don't exist. And there's all sorts of ways to pretend like they don't exist. We can busy ourselves with activity. We can tune in to the news or TV shows and stay constantly distracted. Fill in the blank with the way that you do it. But what this Sunday of Epiphany invites us to do is to be honest about the star that's lodged in our own eye. Some deep-seated hope, some question, some desire, some sense of fulfillment, and be open to God who shows up in all of the wrong places, at all of the wrong times, in all of the wrong people, to maybe, just maybe, show up in us. Last night, I finished a book entitled James by Percival Everett. Some of you probably read it. It was a big, popular book last year. James is the retelling of the story of Huckleberry Finn, but from this perspective of Jim, the slave that traveled around with Huck. And James happens upon a pencil, which slaves weren't supposed to have, and a notebook, which slaves weren't supposed to have because slaves weren't supposed to be able to read and write. And when he did, this is his musing. He said, but my interest in these two things is how these marks that I'm scratching on this page can mean anything at all. If they have meaning, then life can have meaning. Then I can have meaning. The very idea of meaning is at the core of who we are. In a book that Percival Everett wrote in the early 2000s, he says this, the main character is a Black author who tries to write successfully and does so with moderate success. And only when he becomes a trope of himself, and so plays into the stereotype of what it means to be a Black person, does his work become popular. And this is what the narrator says about Monk, the main character and author. The world demands that you introduce yourself twice. First as you are, and second as you are told to be. I wonder, friends, how many of us are living life as we are told to be? As we are told to be by our families of origin, as we are told to be by our community's expectations or perceived expectations, as we are told to be by our friend groups, as we are told to be by our job, as we are told to be, and the list goes on and on and on. It is so easy to live, any Wicked fans out there? To live the unexamined life. To live life as we are told to be. And on Epiphany Sunday, what God is inviting the Magi to and inviting us into is to live life as God at the center, to start taking away those masks, to look into a mirror and be honest about what we see and who we see, so that then we can begin to take those steps to live into the truth of who we are and why we might be here. So often in the world of who we are told to be, we have our work selves and our family selves and our tennis team selves and our golf team selves, right? Our friend group self. Anybody tired of keeping up with all those selves and all those expectations of who those people expect you to be? What if this idea of a siloed life is a complete myth? Has anybody ever heard of the Japanese idea of ikigai? Right? Yeah. Want to learn some Japanese? Ikigai is the Japanese concept that refers to finding a life purpose that's meaningful and fulfilling. Refers to finding a life purpose that's meaningful and fulfilling. Isn't that what we all desire after all? To live a life of meaning, a life of purpose? About 10 years ago, a social study was done on people who had pre-existing conditions, heart conditions, blood pressure conditions, things like that. People who, on a scale of 1 to 7, increased their purpose metric by 3 points, decreased their health issues by 27%. That's how much purpose matters. That's how much purpose can affect our very bodies. And so the ikigai in Japanese means this. It's a concept that refers to finding a purpose that's meaningful and fulfilling. It's a combination of 2 words, life and worth. life and reason, or the reason for living. People have depicted it this way. Instead of having your siloed selves, okay, what we love, tennis, golf, whatever, what you're good at, what the world needs, what you paid for, what if there's a way that we can begin to expand our minds and see that we are one person and not several siloed things? What if we were able to look in the mirror and ask questions? Well, what is it that I love? How long has it been that you've asked the question, what is it you love to do? How long has it been since you've asked the question, what does the world need that I might be uniquely gifted to do? How long has it been since you've asked the question, what are you good at? I know how long it's been since you've asked the question, what can you be paid for? Because the bills come every month. But what if we expand the idea of what it means to have a life, a worthy life, a life full of reason? This fundamental truth of Ikigai is that nothing is siloed, that everything is connected. So for us as Christians, on this Epiphany Sunday, we have to ask ourselves, how are we living in our very selves, in our very way of being in the world that is disconnected? How are we living that is disconnected from God? How are we living that is disconnected from our community? How are we living that is disconnected from ourselves, from our family? Are we itchy yet? Because it's only when we start to look in that mirror, it's only when we start to ask these questions, it's only when we start to be honest that we can live a non-siloed life, that we can begin to answer this question, who am I? And what is my purpose on this world? That's why I started my sermon of saying, spoiler alert, I don't know what your purpose is. That is something that in your relationship with God and in your community of small groups and Sunday school and Bible studies and friends that you can be honest with and figure out, or you can email me or text me and we'll go to coffee and we'll talk about it. But I know how to help give you the tools to get there. So often in New Year's resolutions and maybe even coming to church, which I'm so glad you're here on the first Sunday of the year, we think that there's some easy magic fix to feeling better and to living better. And I wish that was true. But if that was true, there still wouldn't be the self-help section in bookstores that sell more books than any other genre. And so we have to begin the work this year of the deeper questions that lead to the deeper answers, that lead to the deeper, more meaningful life. So, what I know for sure about your purpose and who you are is this: that by virtue of being a child of God, created in the image of God, your purpose is to open yourself up to epiphany, to the manifestation of the existence or presence of the divine, so that you may be aware of the divine in your life and that others through you may be aware that God is the living, breathing creator of the universe who beckons all of us into a life of meaning and purpose, if we're willing to ask the hard questions.